saying things until I'm fucking buried in my grave. 6 feet deep under, but my body won't decay. Cause my messages are timeless, so they'll put them on display. Oh yeah, I rap with a certainty, I have a sense of urgency. A message for eternity, for everyone internally. I had some people burning me, but now they fucking learn to see I ain't the one to fuck with. Now they looking nervously, and I don't really care what you think of me respectfully. You can kick rocks if you think you're fucking better, see. I will outwork you, turn you to an enemy. Hurt you so bad that you're gonna need some therapy. I got the motherfucking recipe. I've been cooking up hits, I'ma leave a legacy. You'll be looking small when you're standing right next to me. I'm 5'10", bitch, but I'm 10 feet next to me. I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Yeah, I'ma do it my way.
Okay, and we're live, everybody. I have got some things to show you. This is some interesting information that is coming today from Ukraine, Russia, France, Asia Times, Britain, the EU, the United States. And it's basically saying that World War III is here. This is the equivalent of the early 1960s. I'm not really sure where the understanding of stoicism or making decisions that actually protect your country come from in the West. But let's get into it. Let's get into it. So, first thing, this is according to the Asia Times, I don't know. France sends combat troops to the Ukraine battlefront. Will the deployment of a foreign legion unit commanded by French officers trigger a wider European war? The French have already sent soldiers of their foreign legion to Ukraine. According to former assistant to the US Deputy Secretary of Defense, Stephen Bryan, they are deployed in Slavyansk. That means they're right on the front line. Interesting. In an article for the Asian Times, he explains that the advanced detachment consists of 100 people, artillerymen and scouts. They are tasked with helping the 54th Ukrainian Separate Mechanized Brigade. So they are directly involved in military issues and they are involved in the war. According to him, this is the first group of approximately 1,500 soldiers of the Foreign Legion who should arrive in Ukraine. Okay, that's an article from the Asian Times, according to the former assistant to the US Deputy Secretary of Defense, and his name is Stephen Bryan. In a separate note of the same article, it basically says from the middle paragraph on, Bryan adds that warmongering French President Macron's sending Foreign Legion soldiers is sending Foreign Legion soldiers because the vast majority aren't French citizens, meaning there won't be much home opposition to extremely provocative decision. With Slavyansk being on the front line, French image of soft deployment turning into war with Russia directly. So this is, if this is true, this is France joining the military conflict directly with Russia. According to Brian, the former US Deputy Defense Undersecretary, they're using a different title, a former assistant to the US Deputy, whatever. He says, as France is acting on its own without NATO's backing, the French cannot claim support from NATO under Article 5. And apparently that is what Brian also said in this Asia Times article. Now, that, of course, is an opinion. And it's probably not an opinion that is based on a legal understanding from the United States, because it's only the United States that bloody matters. They will determine. And so the question is, what is actually going on? In further later news, the French Foreign Ministry says Paris did not send soldiers of the Foreign Legion to Ukraine. Okay, so this is now getting somewhat confusing. And there's a picture of it. All right. Let's let me just move that on a little bit, and then I'm going to stop that screen and I'm going to bring something else up. Let's see what Alex Christoforou from the Duran says. Now, the Duran is absolutely superb, I have to say. If you're wanting to know anything about what's going on in geopolitics around Ukraine, Russia, around Georgia, around Syria, around Israel and Palestine, etc., and anything else that comes up, China as well, I very much recommend that you subscribe to the Duran, to Alex Christoforou, which is this guy, and to Alexander Mercouris, who is his partner. So they both have their own individual channels, and they have the Duran as their together partnership channel. But this is about 6 or 7 minutes long, and he goes into a bit more detail. He's got a lot more information about this than I have. He's got a much better understanding of what is going on, and he explains it in a much more interesting way than I could.
Let's read a little bit from this Asia Times article and try to understand what is going on here. France has sent its first troops officially to Ukraine. They have been deployed in support of the Ukrainian 54th Independent Mechanized Brigade in Slavyansk, right on the front lines. The French soldiers are drawn from France's 3rd Infantry Regiment, which is one of the main elements of France's Foreign Legion.
So exactly how waterproof is the bearskin softshell jacket? Let's just say this is the last.
That's key. That is key. This is from France's Foreign Legion, okay? The decision to send foreign legionnaires is itself a peculiar French compromise. France is not deploying its home army, and besides the small number of officers, the men sent are not French citizens. So 100 Foreign Legion soldiers have been deployed to Slavyansk. The reporting is that the total number will be 1,500 Foreign Legion soldiers, not the official French army. And Asia Times is even saying that the men are not even French citizens. That is what Asia Times is reporting. So what is Macron up to? Well, according to Asia Times, this allows Macron, sending the French Foreign Legion, allows Macron to send troops to Ukraine and act like a tough guy without encountering much home opposition. That's because no French army soldiers are being sent, and there is no consequent conscription or other measures in the offing. This clearly reduces the potential fury of Macron's political opponents.
But it has direct implications on what is going to happen next. Well, undoubtedly, if these troops are there, they will be targeted. There will be very high rewards paid by the Russian Ministry of Defense for anybody that manages to I hesitate to say capture, but I would guess possibly that a surrendering French Foreign Legionnaire might be quite a highly prized asset. But if they target them and they are able to eliminate them, shall we say, that's going to be a very high reward for these people.
So basically, Macron is able to send French troops without really sending French troops. That's what Macron is doing, and he can continue to play this strategic ambiguity game. He can send this Foreign Legion. He can send them to Slaviansk, which is right on the front line. They're going to get annihilated by the Russian military. So he's basically sending them to their annihilation. He can send them to Slaviansk. He can see the Russian reaction. He can see NATO's reaction. He can see the UK's reaction and David Cameron's reaction. He can see the US's reaction as these Foreign Legion troops get annihilated by Russia. Then he can send another 1,500. He can see Russia's reaction. He can see the collective West reaction, and he can play this strategic ambiguity game without having to say that he is sending French troops to Ukraine, official French army into Ukraine.
But the interesting statement was the one by Mr. Bryan, which is that military establishments and France will be a legitimate target to Russia at any point once it is proven that they have actually sent part of their army into Ukraine to fight Russia. This is a fascinating aspect to this whole thing. Fascinating is a rather worrying word, because the implication is World War III is here.
And he can continue to position himself as the tough guy. So Lavrov, he sounded off on Macron's strategic ambiguity game, and here is what Lavrov said. Speaking to the Bosnian Serb Alternativna TV on Sunday, Lavrov noted the French leader's recent interview with The Economist, in which he called Moscow the main threat to EU security, adding that Macron had adopted an ardent anti-Russian stance. According to the French leader, the ambitions of the mustache man and Napoleon were driven by the fact that these countries saw Russia as a threat, Lavrov claimed. I know how the power system is set up in France and how the French tend to see their role in Europe. I do not rule out that this caveman Russophobia that Macron is currently breathing might be necessary in order to try and become the leader in Europe by riding this topic, the foreign minister explained. Spot on from Lavrov.
Macron, the leader in Europe.
By sending this Foreign Legion contingent to Slaviansk, by playing up this anti-Russia tough guy role, this position that he's taken up to be the collective West's anti-Russian tough guy, he is trying to position himself as the de facto leader of Europe, of the European Union. Because Macron understands that the more anti-Russian you are, the higher up you rise. And what's more anti-Russian than actually sending troops, even though it's not the official army, but sending troops connected to France, to Ukraine, so that they can be annihilated by the Russian military? What's more anti-Russian than that? So Lavrov is, in my opinion, he's exactly right with what Macron is trying to do. Macron understands that Germany is weak and has been weakened significantly in this 2-year Project Ukraine, and he senses that now is his time to become little Napoleon to become the emperor of Europe.
So the other interesting thing is why does Macron perceive that he is weak? If we go back to the whole of 2022, from February the 24th, Macron kept ringing Putin, kept getting in touch with Putin, and he wouldn't take his call, not once, wouldn't chat to him, wouldn't talk to him, just totally ignored him. That will have really pissed off this little guy with the big ego. So he's then been watching for a while, and he's watched Germany and Poland and the little Baltic Chihuahua states, Sweden and Finland. Everybody else is getting all the kudos for standing up and shouting at Putin and supporting Zelensky. And he's been a bit on the sidelines as Macron. So he's decided that the only way that he can make himself in any way useful to the collective West is to propose that he sends troops to Ukraine to fight directly with Russia, which isn't really the best idea.
And so he's trying to take advantage of everything that's going on and position himself as Jupiter, as little Napoleon. So we have another interview of Macron. He's giving a lot of interviews, isn't he? Macron warns about Russian missiles in a defeated Ukraine. The potential redeployment of Moscow's military assets would threaten not only Kiev's neighbors, but France itself, the president has said. In an interview with the French daily La Tribune on Saturday, Macron, who has famously refused to rule out sending Western troops to Ukraine, once again advocated a policy of strategic ambiguity towards Russia, arguing that the key idea behind such an approach is to project strength while not giving too many details.
That's impossible for the collective West and for the Ukrainians to do. It's been shown that it's impossible because the fact of the matter is Russia has known everything, every major move that Ukraine has attempted to do in advance, way in advance, and they've countered it every single time. I think they gave Russia about 6 or 9 months to do with their great offensive that was going to come that completely bloody flopped. But the other interesting bit about this, when he's talking about Russia is now a threat. If Russia beats Ukraine, Russia is a threat to the rest of us. That's what Ukraine was supposed to be for in the first place. It was supposed to be a buffer zone. That is what the agreement was right from the very beginning. Ukraine would be an independent country separating Russia from Europe. And that was one of the rationales for Russia going in because of NATO. So he's now sort of proving Putin and Russia right, proving that they had good justification.
Describing Russia as an adversary, the French president stressed that establishing priority limits would be interpreted as weakness. We must remove all visibility from it because that is what creates the ability to deter, he argued. Macron further noted that Ukraine is crucial to France's security because it is located only 1,500 kilometers from its borders. If Russia wins, the next second, there is no longer any security possible in Romania, in Finland, in Lithuania, and not in our country either. The capability and range of Russian ballistic missiles expose its all, he said.
It's very, very difficult to understand what Macron is saying here, particularly with his other stuff about strategic ambiguity. I think he's talking about linguistic ambiguity. He's just playing around with words and he's just pushed a load of big words together all in one go and gone, bleh. But no longer any security possible in Romania, Poland, Lithuania, presumably all of the other countries through to France, which would include Germany. It would include Bulgaria. They're all NATO countries. So is he basically saying NATO cannot provide any security whatsoever? The guy's a bit strange, I've got to say. But the claim, Russia's going to come flying through the whole of Europe. Russia's going to take over the whole of Western Europe, all the way to France. And then if he can be bothered, he'll take Spain and Portugal as well. He's just going to take over Europe. What kind of emotional claptrap dribble is this?
Said.
Why does anyone still use ponchos if they never actually work? All you need is the bearskin waterproof tech.
Well, you know, two can play at that game, Macron. Just like you are saying that Russia is a threat to France because it's only 1,500 kilometers away, and that is why the collective West needs to fight the Russian military in Ukraine. Well, Russia can also say that France is a strategic threat to Russia because France is only 1,500 kilometers away from Russia's border. So going by Macron's logic, Russia needs to neutralize France because it's right on Russia's border. I mean, it's only 1,500 kilometers away. Oh boy, interesting logic from Macron. And in a way, Macron's statement here to La Tribune, in a way, it justifies Putin's actions in Ukraine. It rationalizes the special military operation, doesn't it? Because Macron is saying if Russia were to control Ukraine, then it means that Russia is right on the borders with France, or almost on the borders with France, right? You only have Romania and a couple of other countries, and that's all that separates France from Russia. Well, if Ukraine was to be controlled by NATO, then that means that Russia has NATO right on its borders, has an unfriendly, aggressive collective West right on its borders, and not 1,500 kilometers away. We're talking 1 kilometer away. So
1 meter away. It's about crossing that border. You just make a step, don't you? And you cross the border. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on with France. There's a lot happening in relation to how to put the pressure on Russia. And I'm not convinced myself. I'm not convinced that actually sending your own troops in there is going to be of any benefit. From what I know, France has only got about a 60,000 strong military. The UK's got less than a 60,000 strong military. Neither of them have got any artillery. Neither of them have got any armaments anymore. They've handed them all over to Ukraine, and they've all been obliterated. And we don't have any industries to produce them, while Russia is forging ahead. Anyway, I'm going to stop that there. I am going to advise again, subscribe to Alex Christoforou, subscribe to Alexander Mercouris, subscribe to the Duran. If you're interested in geopolitics, these two guys, they have a lot of really interesting interviewees that come on, and they talk about stuff themselves. It's very, very good. I'm going to stop that there. And let's have another look at some of the further things that are going on, because the most interesting thing I haven't even got to yet. Let me share this screen. So the EU will open a military innovation office in Kiev this year. This year. This was stated by the European Commissioner for the Internal Market, Thierry Breton. We will open a European military innovation office. I don't know what a European military... Let's take the word European out. What is a military innovation office? What does that mean? I haven't got the faintest idea. We will open. I would say it in a French accent, but I don't know whether he's French or whether he's Belgian or Dutch or whatever. Could be from anywhere. It's Thierry Breton. We will open a European military innovation office in Kiev to create a bridge between European innovative startups and Ukrainian weapons manufacturing enterprises and the Ukrainian army, so that European enterprises can help the Ukrainian armed forces on the battlefield. Earlier, Borrell, the head of European diplomacy, said that it would be desirable for Kiev to produce weapons in Ukraine. So that suggests there's a military establishment from Europe in Ukraine, which will be an immediate military target. Let's move on a little bit. This is from the Washington Post. We reported for months on changes sweeping Russia. Here's what we found. There's a nice picture of Putin. Russia, the most dangerous and aggressive enemy of the United States. The Washington Post conducted its own investigation. For over 6 months, the WP has been investigating the changes taking place in Russia as Putin has used the war in Ukraine to strengthen his power. Here's what we found out. Russia positions itself as a superpower, an enemy of the United States. Putin is establishing military partnerships with other totalitarian regimes that also view the United States as a threat, including China, Iran, and North Korea. That's interesting. That's reread that and just say, instead of using those words, say, Russia is looking like they're about to establish an equivalent of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization with their allies, who happen to view the United States as a threat, in which they might also have Article 5 equivalency. So anybody attacking Iran, China, North Korea, or Russia, then the others come in. This is the direct implication of everything NATO has actually done. Russia and these other countries develop such treaty organizations, defensive, allegedly defensive security countries who work together. One attack on one country is an attack on all. You may well end up with this, with a further splitting of society, all caused by the simple concept of NATO in and of itself. Russia is militarizing society and raising a new generation of patriots. It's naughty being a patriot. Clearly, you're not allowed to be a patriot. And you're not allowed to defend yourself by developing your society to defend itself, according to the WAPO. And there's the little one at the bottom. Russia glorifies Stalin. At least 95 out of 110 Stalin monuments in Russia were erected during Putin's rule. Hey, people are allowed their opinions. Just because you don't like it. I don't like Stalin. But hey, Stalin was the war leader. Stalin was the equivalent of Churchill in relation to fighting Nazi Germany. So, Right, well, there's been some interesting stuff to do with the Great British United Kingdom. David Cameron has turned around to Ukraine and said, we're going to give you lots of weapons and we're going to let you use them against Russia. Okay. This is now the Russian embassy in London's comment on the provocative statements by David Cameron, the British Foreign Minister. During his visit to Kiev on the 2nd of May, UK Foreign Secretary David Cameron made another provocative statement allowing the use of British weapons by the Ukrainian armed forces to launch attacks on Russian territory, including outside the Special Military Operations Zone. We consider this confession as confirmation of the UK's increasing direct involvement in the armed conflict in Ukraine. So this is no longer just about France. It's no longer about the EU itself opening an office. It's now the UK threatening Russia by giving armaments and telling Ukraine, and probably guiding them how to do it and giving them targets and helping them plug in the targets accurately into the British systems or the NATO systems so that they can go, it wasn't us, Gov. They pressed the button. We consider this confession as confirmation of the UK's increasing direct involvement in the armed conflict in Ukraine, alongside France and the EU as well, and US. The UK government is persistently pursuing a course of escalation and expansion of geography of military actions. It's still weak, but we'll see what the UK can actually do. Raising the stakes in the proxy confrontation with Russia has become an end in itself for London. At the same time, it seems the British establishment is not interested at all in getting to the bottom of the true causes of the conflict, which include NATO expansion, which is exactly what Macron has just confirmed is a justifiable reason for fighting your enemy. It is symbolic that David Cameron's blitz visit to Kiev came on the 10th anniversary of the terrible events in the trade union's house in Odessa, where the Ukrainian nationalists brought to power in Kiev by the West and their accomplices burned 48 innocent people alive. That sort of links into, okay, what is going on? It is also the weekend of the Orthodox Easter. It is also just 1 week away, 4 days away from May the 10th, or is it May the 9th? I can't remember which is the major date for Russia, which I think is a military date, something to do with World War II and victory in World War II and victory over Germany. So this might all just be about timing, just to wind Russia up. But it does look very provocative. It continues. Giving the Zelensky regime a carte blanche to use British weapons for terrorist shelling of Russian cities deep inside our country, London, having dropped its masks, confirmed the obvious, that the remnants of Ukraine's economic and demographic potential, territorial control, as well as statehood, will be used exclusively in attempts to militarily and forcefully weaken Russia. The British establishment cares little about the fate of civilians, as it was once in Odessa. In this context, it is no coincidence that our investigative bodies are getting evidence of the use by the Ukrainian armed forces of British-French missile weapons to shell peaceful city of Belgorod back in December 2023, long before David Cameron's current self-exposing statements. For our part, we affirm the UK's prodding will only prolong the agony of the neo-Nazi regime entrenched in Kiev. Now, that was all a quote. I did not say those words that from my own mouth, other than merely to read out what this quote from the Russian embassy in London actually had in response to UK threats against Russia. But this isn't all. You'll note in the general mainstream media, they're always talking about, some guy on a news program in Russia is saying stuff about threatening Britain with nuclear attack, and how this super duper new nuclear weapon that Russia has can produce a tsunami which will obliterate the whole of Britain. None of that has come as official from any officials whatsoever. However, that was the Russian embassy in London. This is now the Russian Foreign Ministry in Moscow. They have put out a media statement warning the British ambassador that any military installations in London, in Ukraine, or anywhere else could be a response. In other words, could be a target in response to attacks on Russian territory by British weapons. Now, this translation that is up here cannot be seen because it's not good enough. So I got a better picture of it. On the summons of the British ambassador to the Russian Foreign Ministry. So in Moscow, they have demanded that the British ambassador turn up and get a right old ticking off. He's got a right spanking by Lavrov, or maybe even Zaharova. And this is a media release. This is the British version of it, language version of it. On May the 6th, the British ambassador to Moscow, N. Casey, was summoned to the Russian Foreign Ministry, to whom a strong protest was expressed in connection with the recent statement by Foreign Secretary David Cameron in an interview with Reuters about Ukraine's right to strike Russian territory with British weapons. There's something going on here now. N. Casey firmly pointed out that David Cameron's hostile attack directly contradicts the previously sounded assurances of the British side when transferring long-range cruise missiles to the Kiev regime, that under no circumstances would they be used on Russian territory. That's an interesting pointing out by the British ambassador, N. Casey, because your assurances of one thing at one time can change. And frankly, Mr. Casey, Ms. Casey, David Cameron might have changed his mind and you might have just said a load of bullshit, or you've implied a load of bullshit. Because all you actually said was, well, in the past we said we wouldn't do anything, we wouldn't let them do some stuff. And under no circumstances in that circumstance would those missiles at that time be allowed to be used on Russian territory. So, typical weasel words from a diplomat. Thus, the head of the Foreign Office disavowed this position, de facto recognizing his country as a party to the conflict. I don't really know what they mean here, because the head of the Foreign Office, right, that's David Cameron. David Cameron, the Foreign Secretary, disavowed the position that N. Casey had given. And David Cameron de facto recognised Britain as a party to the conflict. Now, this is a bit dangerous. This really is quite dangerous because David Cameron did say that. And Britain might now be a legitimate target alongside France. And as soon as the EU puts its military innovation office anywhere near or inside Ukraine, the EU will also be a legitimate target. The ambassador was told that the Russian side views David Cameron's words as evidence of a serious escalation and confirmation of London's increasing involvement in military operations on the side of Kiev. N. Casey was warned the response to Ukrainian strikes using British weapons on Russian territory could be any British military facilities and equipment on the territory of Ukraine and beyond. The ambassador was called upon to think about the inevitable catastrophic consequences of such hostile steps from London and to immediately refute in the most decisive and unequivocal manner the bellicose, provocative statements of the head of the Foreign Office. Now, of course, N. Casey cannot refute his boss, her boss. I don't know whether N. Casey is male or female. Whoever they are, they cannot refute David Cameron. David Cameron is the political leader of the Foreign Office, working on behalf of the government, and all civil servants must be impartial and follow the shit decisions that politicians take. But what's very clear here is that Britain was warned that Russia's response to Ukraine strikes would be, as a possibility, striking any British military facilities and equipment on the territory of Ukraine and beyond. So in Britain, in Europe, in America, during NATO exercises in the Baltic Sea, any British military facilities. So that's from the Russian Foreign Ministry. Now, of course, our friend, Mr. Medvedev, always likes to take things just a little bit further, of course. This is his original, but it's in Cyrillic, and I can't read Cyrillic, so I pressed the translate button and it produced it in English. And it says, "Choir of the irresponsible. The number of scoundrels among the Western political elite calling for sending their troops to a non-existent country 404, is expanding." It was Medvedev that termed Ukraine country 404, which is very funny, quite provocative. Now it includes representatives of the US Congress, French and British leadership, and individual madmen from the Baltic states and Poland. He does like winding people up, does Medvedev. He's a bit like Trump in some ways. He'll say whatever the hell he likes. Zaharova is very good as well. She has forked tongue or nasty tongue. They also call for the active use of their missile weapons, which they supply to the Banderites throughout Russia. And this is not a spring aggravation, but a cynical calculation for political dividends. There is some kind of total degradation of the ruling class in the West. This class really does not want to logically connect elementary things. In other words, use their bloody brains. Sending your troops to the territory of Ukraine will entail the direct entry of their countries into the war, to which we will have to respond, and alas, not in the territory of Ukraine. Medvedev is making it very, very clear his view of what will happen. In this case, none of them will be able to hide either on Capitol Hill or in the Elysee Palace or in Downing Street. A world catastrophe will come. By the way, Kennedy and Khrushchev were able to understand this more than 60 years ago. But the current infantile morons who have seized power in the West do not want to understand. Medvedev uses the same sort of language that I often use when talking on Brojo's show. Very, very good. Very impressive. And that is why today the General Staff began preparations for the exercises, including activities for practical testing of the preparation and use of non-strategic nuclear weapons. Now that's this. I'm not going to use a joke word. That's a fucking bombshell. This is Medvedev, who heads the Defensive Council or whatever it's called in Russia. Defensive Military something. He heads it. He used to be the Prime Minister. That is why today the General Staff began preparations for the exercises, including activities for practical testing of the preparation and use of non-strategic nuclear weapons. This is all part of Russia's constitution. Anybody that attacks Russia, one of Russia's responses can be nuclear. He is basically saying the people that are involved in this conflict, we are going to practice targeting you with nuclear bombs. Now, I don't know whether he's bluffing, pretty much like Khrushchev was, and yet he wasn't. This is a response to the West since 2001 in trying to get Ukraine completely Russophobic, no longer an independent country, part of NATO, to dehumanize the Russian ethnic people of Ukraine, to classify them all as terrorists, to bomb them and shoot them, to go after them in Odessa, corral them in the trade union house and set it on fire, murdering 48 people, innocent people, who were merely having a demonstration. But we are now escalating it. And by escalating it, we get a response from Russia. And the response from Russia is, you complete and utter fuckwits, you are taking us towards World War III, and we're quite happy to deliver World War III to you. Because that is what the collective West is fucking doing. the collective West is pushing Russia towards all of this. And what the collective West will then do is say, it's all Russia's fault. See, we've been saying for the last 2 years that Russia was going to use nuclear weapons, that Russia was going to attack the West, that Russia wanted XYZ, that Russia this, Russia that, Russia the other, Russia's bad, Russia's nasty. We've got to wreck Russia. We've got to go to war with Russia. I hope you're ready for war, people. Because unless the West backs down from this stupidity, from getting involved in a fucking civil war between Russian people in Ukraine, because there's no fucking difference between them in reality. You can't look at one and then look at the other and go, that one's them and that one's them. You don't understand which language is which. You can't tell the difference between them. So, glory days, we're going to war. Pack your bags. Get a load of nice green T-shirts from Vladimir Zelensky, because he's probably got a shitload of them spare, and he'll sell you one for $10,000 because he needs the money, especially now that BlackRock and the others are demanding that Ukraine pays back all the interest that they owe, or they start paying it, which is $500 million per year. So please, yeah, don't leave a comment at the bottom here about how I am anti-war or some kind of weak-ass pussy. Don't bother leaving a comment. Just go and sign up. Just go and sign up to your army and say, I want to go over there and fight Russia. I want to go and fight. Is what you need to do. You need to sign up for your military and fuck off over there and get obliterated. All right? You'll have a few options. One of them will be run and retreat. Another one will be get your head blown off. Another one will be have some other part of your body blown off, so you've got really terrible life-altering injuries for the rest of your life, which might not last very long, considering how we know that our countries treat military veterans. They don't give a shit about them. They prefer you died. The last option could possibly be surrender. But I don't know. I haven't got a clue how Russia would treat these mercenaries turning up there. Would they treat them as prisoners of war, or would they treat them as terrorists or mercenaries who do not have the Geneva Convention behind them? So, please get ready. Please sell all your shit, because you won't need it where you're going. You might need to buy your own boots and buy your own fatigues and a belt, because you're going to lose weight out there. Quite a lot of it. And enjoy yourself. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.